Hi guys, welcome to The Bite. My name is Jackie. Today I'm so excited to share with you one of my favorite dishes of all time. This is Shishbarak, which are basically mini raviolis or mini tortellinis rather because of the shape. And they're filled with a delicious ground beef and onion mixture. And it uses, if you watched my last video on how to make laban immo, it uses the lamb broth that we made in that video. And my parents, everybody kind of makes it differently, every household in every region, especially of Palestine, where this is very, very common. And not everybody uses lamb broth. A lot of people just use the yogurt, which is, this is in a yogurt broth. A lot of people use yogurt, water, and some cornstarch to thicken the broth. My family has always used the yogurt and the lamb broth to flavor it. So I'm gonna show you how to use that lamb broth that we reserved today. First thing I'm gonna do is make the dough for the little dumplings. All you're gonna need is flour, salt, some olive oil, and some warm water. You can knead this by hand, but I'm gonna use the hand mixer. Then I'll go in and show you how to make the filling, and then we will go into how to make each dumpling by hand, because this is a labor of love, and then we get to eat the fruits of our labor. Today, we picked the first lemon off of our lemon tree, and that was really exciting. And I felt like that was the fruit of our labor, literally, and this is the fruit of our labor. So let's get to making the dough. Okay, so I'm gonna use my stand mixer to make the dough, and I have all my flour and a little bit of salt right here. The measurements, like always, can be found on my blog, and that's the first link in the description box down below. So all the measurements will be there always. So this is all gonna go straight into my stand mixer, and again, you can knead this by hand. And usually that's how my mom did it, and she would make like 5 times the batch of this size. I'm going to add in the warm water and the olive oil. And the olive oil is going to give these a really kind of silky flavor. I wanna make sure I get that all out of there. So now I'm just going to knead this until the dough comes together in a smooth ball. So the dough has come together, it's in a ball, and I'm just going to take it out and put it right back into the same bowl that I had the dry ingredients in. Now, this doesn't have yeast in it, so it doesn't technically need to rise, but it does need to rest. Anytime you work with any kind of dough, you need to let it rest after you work with it, because otherwise it'll get too tense, too firm, and it won't kind of relax and be a soft dough, which is what I'm looking for this. So I'm just going to let this sit. I want to make the sign of the cross with it, just like my mom always did whenever she made any kind of dough, before I let it rest. Let me know in the comments below if your family does that too. She always went like this with the side of her hand. And I'm just going to pour just a bit more olive oil on it to keep it nice and fluffy. And we are going to cover this with some plastic wrap. It doesn't need to be perfect. We're going to be rolling this out anyways. Doesn't need to be kneaded any further. I'm gonna cover this, put this in a microwave or oven that are off, a draft-free place, and just let it sit while we make our filling, and we'll move on from there. So now that the dough is resting, we can move on to the filling. So for the filling, I have some lean ground beef. I like to use lean because there's a lot of fat in the yogurt already because I use the whole milk. So I figured wherever I can take out a little bit, I will do it. So lean ground beef, some parsley and garlic, some onions that I chopped very, very fine because these are very small dumplings and you don't want the onions to take over. You don't really want to bite into like a huge chunk of onion, so very fine. Some allspice and nutmeg, salt and pepper, and some olive oil. So we're just gonna cook this real quick on the stove, let it cool, and then before we form the dumplings. So meet me at the stove. All right, so now we're gonna get cooking the meat. I'm just going to add this all right into my pan. And I have a little bit of olive oil in here right now. I want to break this up as finely as possible while it cooks because these dumplings, like I mentioned, are going to be very small. So the meat needs to fit in there. And if there's large chunks of meat and large chunks of onions, it just won't have the same effect. So as finely ground as you can get it, do that. Once that's done, I will add the seasonings and the onions and it will be done. That's basically it. All right, so the meat is cooked. You can see it's very, very finely ground. There's still a little bit of fat that's rendered off and a little bit from probably the olive oil that I put in. I want to take some of this out because when I'm rolling out the dumplings, the oils in here make it kind of hard and it gets slippery and it doesn't seal. So take out as much of this as you can. You can leave a little bit for flavor, but I'm gonna take out the majority of this. And then I will add the onions, the parsley, all the spices, and finish it up. All right, so I took that out. Now I'm going to go right in with my finely diced onions. The pan keeps moving on me. Okay, I'm gonna add in my spices, my garlic, the parsley. Now this parsley I actually had in the freezer because whenever I have extra before it goes bad, I like to stick it in the freezer. And then just some salt, because we haven't salted anything yet, and a little bit of pepper. I just want to cook this up until the onions soften, set it aside to cool, and then once that happens, the dough will be ready for us to work with. So you can see that these onions are really starting to soften and they're looking good. I want to cook this just a couple minutes further. If you find that you took out maybe a little too much fat, like I did in this case, and you find that it's not cooking right, it's not really softening the onions, reserve that fat that you pulled aside and just add a couple tablespoons at a time until you get it to the right consistency to where it's juicy, softened, but not overflowing in extra liquid. So this is done. I am just going to turn off the heat, set it aside, and let it cool. Once that happens, we can start forming our dumplings. All right, so the dough has rested. It's nice and soft and elastic. I am going to cut this into fours just to make my job a little bit easier so that when I'm making the dumplings, I'm not working with a huge amount of dough at one time. So I like to set the other pieces back in the bowl. Covered. What did I do with my plastic wrap? It's somewhere. Then, ooh, I need a rolling pin. 1 minute. All right, so I cut my dough into fours that you saw. The meat has been cooling. I've got my rolling pin and I have a floured surface and also a floured baking tray. So I have one dumpling done and this is the goal. This is what we're going for right here. I made one just to test out the dough and it's perfect. So let me show you how to make them. So to roll it out, you want first to just kind of put a little bit of flour on it just to make it a little easier to work with. Then we want to roll it out and look at how beautiful and soft and elastic this dough is. It's like pasta. You want it to be like 1/8 of an inch thick. And then we're going to take probably a little bit more than that. Then we're going to cut each piece using a shot glass because that's what my family always used. If you don't drink and you don't have shot glasses, this is the size that you're looking for. You can also use the little fanajin for ahwa arabiya or the Arabic coffee. It's a little bit bigger. You can use an espresso cup, anything this size. You don't want them too big because the beauty of these is that they're little bite-sized dumplings. So you want them to maintain that small shape. That's just the traditional way to do it. So this is about how thin I want the dough, like this. It's not paper thin by any means, probably about 1/8 of an inch thick, right? So take your shot glass. Take it to the very edge that you possibly can. I like to, this was my job when I was growing up and my mom would make this. I would be the one cutting out all these little circles. So take it to the very edge, push down and twist, and you're left with one piece of dough. So continue doing that until you can use every little bit of surface area possible. But the beauty of this dough is that there's no yeast. So whatever excess dough is left, we can put it back together, stick it in here while we work with the other dough and reuse it because it's not a yeasted dough. It'll come back together and we can make more dumplings with it. So I'm gonna continue doing this and I'll show you how to put each one together. All right, so I cut out all the dough and I'm just going to lift off the excess parts around the edges. And put them aside, bring them to a ball, and stick it right back in that bowl. All right, done. This is going to get put back together as best as I can. Again, because we're working with it, it needs to rest. I just wanted to bring it together. And this will be the last one that I use. So I'm gonna use these bigger pieces first, and then I'll use this so that it has time to rest so that we can reform it easily. So that's gonna go back in here covered. Now, to make the dumplings, you want to take one piece, so come close so that I can show you. Right here, take one piece. Now, it is still a little bit puffy, so you need to flatten it out a little bit so that you can form it more easily. Then, you take like half a teaspoon's worth of the filling, and you just place it right in the center. You don't want them to be overfilled because you don't want them to bust open while they're cooking. So then you form it into a little taco shape like this. Just like this. And anything that falls out, just put it right back in here. And you wanna make sure that the edges are completely sealed, kind of like an empanada or something. Then you're gonna bring these two pieces together and overlap one on the other like this. And then you're gonna lift the bottom parts up like that. So it looks just like these. And I'm just gonna stick them because they need to dry a little bit before you cook them. So I'm gonna show you how to do a couple more, okay? So you have your dough. You're just going to open it up with your fingers slightly like this. You don't want it to be too thin. Take a little bit of the filling, right? Fold it over, push down so that it's sealed all the way across, just like that. Then bring the two ends together and fold one over the other, push down so that part is sealed. And then how it's down right here, you want to bring those edges up. Like that, okay? Last one. I'll do this one a little bit faster. And you know, this seems like a lot of work, but really once you kind of get the momentum going, it does go pretty fast. My mom would make huge amounts of this. I mean, I used, I think, 3 cups of flour in the dough. She would use probably 7, 8 cups, and she'd be sitting there with this big metal bowl. We would sit on the floor and she'd be kneading it, and we would have a teapot up on the stove with warm water, and she would tell me, more water, and I'd pour water in her hand and she'd say more, and I'd pour more, and then she would keep kneading, and then she'd say oil. I'd put the oil, she'd knead, and then if it was too wet, she'd say flour, okay, flour. So it was, everything was by look and feel, and I absolutely love that. So this is definitely reminding me, and actually my parents are here right now, so this is really reminding me of old times, and it's really nice. So that is all you need to do for that. You're just gonna continue doing, like I said, the larger pieces of dough first, and then we'll work on the pieces that we brought back together in a circle, and I will show you how to make the soup portion from there. All right, all the shishbarak is rolled out. Take a look at how beautiful these look. And I wanna quickly shout out my mom who helped me once again, just like she did with the malfouf, she helped me make all of these. And my mother-in-law who's out there feeding the baby. It truly takes a village, you guys. Truly takes a village. So these, you wanna let these sit for a little bit. Kind of like pasta. When you make fresh pasta, you wanna let it sit so that it can slightly dry out. Lots of families actually toast these for about 5 minutes in the oven at a very low heat, just to get like a nice golden brown on top and it becomes a little bit crunchy. My family never did that. My family did it more pasta style, where you just take these, and you cook them in the yogurt sauce. And this yogurt sauce is just like how I did my laban immo. So if you saw that video, I'll link it down below. All you're gonna need for that broth is yogurt, and now this is plain yogurt with whole milk. You don't want to get the low-fat kind. This just has a lot more flavor. You're gonna need a whole 2-pound container of this. We have that beautiful lamb broth that we made with the laban immo from last time, and that is sitting back there in this white bowl. Some salt, an egg, and then for the adha, which is the garlic, the sauteed garlic that goes on top, I have some garlic and my samneh, or you can use ghee or butter. Samneh is just clarified butter with a little bit of spice in there that enhances the flavor of the food. Also a little bit of dried mint to finish it off. If you notice here, I have some extra meat. It kind of can be hard to get the exact amount of meat to dough ratio. This meat you can just eat with bread, like pita bread. We, you know, hummus, where you take it, the bread, and you just dip it like this and you eat it like a sandwich. And you can use it with pasta, however you want, but this is just extra filling that was left over. So to start the sauce, you just take a whole container of the yogurt, and that goes right into the pot. Now, if you saw me do this in the laban immo video, we're doing the exact same thing. It's important that this is done off the heat, and you want to, this is my dad's trick. When you take it from the container into here, it can kind of have a lot of large clumps. So you want to take it and just stir it so that it's one smooth yogurt mixture. So come take a look at what I'm talking about. You can see that now it's one smooth mixture, just like this. Then to this, you want to just add an egg directly in, and make sure that the yolk is completely mixed in to the yogurt, and it'll be like kind of a pale yellow color you can see here. And you can see that that yolk is really getting mixed in. And now we're just going to add a tiny bit of salt, because we did salt that lamb broth, so you don't want to add too much. You can always add more later if you feel like it needs it. So now that this step is done, this is what it looks like, almost custard-like. And this is going to go on the stove on medium-low heat. You don't want it to be too high, and you need to stand next to the pot. So you don't want to be going away. You need to stand next to it and continue stirring it in one direction until it starts to steam and little bubbles start to form in the yogurt. And at that point, we can add in the lamb broth. So come with me to the stove. All right, so this is looking good. The yogurt kind of thins out a bit as it sits, and there are starting to see some steam. There are little bubbles forming around the edges. So to me, this looks good. I'm a little bit impatient. I should wait a little bit more, but I'm ready to eat my shishbarak. So I'm going to take, so this was the leftover lamb broth from my laban immo, and this is good enough for, I'm gonna use all of this basically. So I'm just going to pour this right on in. And those are just the spices at the bottom. And give this a good stir, because it's a little bit separated. You can see that there's some separation. So as you mix it, and again, you want to stay in one direction and not go very far. As you keep stirring it, it will combine and it will not curdle if you keep it in one direction. So it's really important to do that. If you find that you need more broth, you can either add a little bit more water to this, because the broth already has the flavor, and we're gonna enhance it with some salt too. And we're also adding the adha, which is the fried garlic. But for me, I think I do need a little bit of water. That typically doesn't happen, but because I have a lot of shishbarak and I want to cook a lot of it, I'm going to add a bit of water here. So just do it to your liking, and I'll show you what it should look like with the shishbarak in there. All right, so this broth, I raised the heat up a little bit to medium high-ish, and I am going to start adding in my shishbarak. So you want to do it pretty carefully, because these are pretty delicate. So I have a little spider here, and I'm just going to add a few of my shishbarak in the spider, and then carefully add it into the broth. And this is going to prevent them from breaking or falling apart when we add them in. So there's just a few I'll let them loose. And there they go. Here's a few more. And I may not use all of these today. I may end up freezing some, and I'll walk you through how we freeze them. But look at how beautiful they are. All right, these are gonna go right in, and I like to lower them into the broth and kind of just shake them loose, just like that. Now, if you want to freeze these, what I suggest is take a plastic bag, add a little bit of flour in there after they've sat, and you can feel that they've kind of dried out slightly. Add a little bit of flour in the bag and place them one by one in the bag. Shake it a little bit so that the flour can coat them and they won't stick together, and then just place them in your freezer and you're good to go for a meal. And if you have lamb broth in there, you're good. You got shishbarak, you got lamb broth, you're ready. Another way to do it is to take, if you have the room in your freezer, I don't always have this kind of room, but you would take a tray, like a baking tray just like this, and line them up and flash freeze them. So you would freeze them for about 30 minutes. So again, so that they don't stick together, and then add them into the Ziploc bag with a little bit of flour as well. So I am going to see how much I can fit in here. I'm going to continue adding some, and then I will make the adha to add on top of the broth. So while these shishbarak are cooking, by the way, see this tray? It's empty. Who was I kidding? I added all of them in there. I want my shishbarak. While that's cooking, it takes about 5 to 7 minutes, and you can kind of see them float to the top. That's how you know that they're done. I'm going to start on the adha. So I have in here some samneh, and I'm going to add in my garlic. And I want this to get nice and toasty and golden brown. Once that happens, it's gonna go directly in here and give this broth a lot of really good garlicky flavor. Then I will take some crushed mint, crush it between my hands, and drizzle that right on top. And we are ready to serve it up at that point with a little bit of toasted almonds or pine nuts. Today I'm using almonds. So once this gets golden brown, I'll show you how I add it in, and we're almost ready. We are almost ready at that point. So this garlic is beautifully golden brown, and this is going directly into the pot. Don't worry, we're gonna get all of that out there. So this is the closest thing that I had. Normally I'd use a ladle. And that's gonna go. You want every last bit of that garlicky goodness. Oh, I did have my ladle. It's okay. So you wanna make sure that's all in there. And then just give it a quick stir gently, because you don't want to break your shishbarak. All that hard work that you put into creating these dumplings, you need to be very delicate. So at this point, you can see that garlic, you can see them all floating to the top. So check that out. This is how you know that they're done. They have kind of changed color a little bit. They're a little bit more opaque, and they have really plumped up, collected all that delicious yogurt juice and the lamb broth. And now I'm gonna take the dried mint in my hands and just crush it. And it just looks so inviting with that green. So when you see it, it's got the garlic, the crushed garlic that has that golden color. And then you see these green flecks. Check that out. Look at how beautiful. And then give it a quick stir again. I have some toasted almonds waiting on me, and we are ready to serve this baby up. So I'll meet you at the table. Look at how beautiful this looks. You can see all the flecks of green, all these beautiful dumplings floating to the top. I can't wait to dig in. So I'm gonna just take a few, just like this. And I need to find my spoon. All right, so I just toasted these slivered almonds with a little bit of samneh, just like I did with the garlic. And now let me cut into one to show you what the inside looks like. So this is what it looks like when it's cooked. And then the inside of them looks like that. And that's why I said to cut the meat really, really fine, because if it were big pieces, you would not get that same bite. It would be harder. This, it kind of is gonna fall apart and melt in your mouth, and it's just so good. So let me give it a taste. Still hot. really, really hits the spot. These dumplings are everything, and making them homemade is a labor of love, but make it a weekend project. It can be really fun, especially if you have some company, and put on some YouTube, watch your shows. It's so good. And make extra so that you can freeze it and have a quick meal for later on. So good. Don't forget, all the ingredients and the directions are in the description box down below, or in my blog, which is in the description box down below. You'll find that link. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you remake this, please tag me on Instagram and Facebook. I love to see your remakes. And until then, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time on The Bite.